This is the 5-minute guide to the Ironclad Huascar, a warship of the Peruvian and Chilean navies.
The Huascar is one of those ships that exemplifies why the phrase, "may you live in interesting times," can be seen as both blessing and curse. She had a very eventful life, but you might not have actually wanted to serve aboard her, especially if you happened to be a captain. Now, the Huascar started life as an early ironclad turret ship. Keeping in mind that the first true ironclad, the HMS Warrior, had only been ordered 5 years previously, the ship was one of many experimental warship types in the 1860s. Not as large or as capable as an ocean-going battleship like the Warrior, but still substantially more ocean-capable than most of the Monitor-type vessels used in the American Civil War. Her design was actually based on 2 small ironclad turret ram ships that the Laird Company had built for the Confederacy before they were seized by the British government for violating the British Empire's neutrality in that particular war. She was ordered in 1864 and equipped with a 4.5-inch thick belt of armour, a 7.5-inch thick armoured turret, and a 3-inch thick armoured conning tower. Now, as for weapons, we'll hand you over to our regular narrator.
The ship was armed with a single twin turret carrying a pair of 10-inch guns. At the time, guns were more usually rated by the weight of shot they used, so most documents called them 300-pound guns. A pair of smaller 40-pound guns, a 12-pound cannon and a Gatling gun completed the ranged armament.
Thank you very much. Now, the ship was also equipped with a weapon that was thought to be vital at the time, given that the thickest armour appeared to be almost invulnerable to any gun afloat. This was the ram bow, which was also armoured. At 12 knots, the ship was not the fastest thing afloat, but its speed was respectable. Upon completion in late 1865, she commissioned into service of the Peruvian Navy under the name of Huascar, the penultimate ruler of the Inca Empire. Like the Georgios Averof half a century later, her career started somewhat poorly, getting stuck in a French port for a month, then accidentally hitting one of her own side's other ironclads, the corvette Independencia, and then various neutral countries refused her from their ports. Having eventually made it across the Atlantic and needing a month of repairs in Rio amongst other minor dramas, she ended up arriving just too late for the war against Spain that she'd actually been ordered for. In 1868, Captain Grau took command. He would go on to be the ship's longest-serving commander and the most renowned Peruvian naval officer. She would see her first action a decade later when the Peruvian Civil War kicked off. When she was seized by rebels and operated against government shipping, she ended up fighting the Royal Navy when her activities began to affect British trade. Now, this degenerated into a little bit of a slap fight, as the British ships were faster but unarmoured corvettes. They hit the Huascar repeatedly, but the armour did its job keeping out all incoming fire. Meanwhile, the few guns the Huascar had proved incapable of hitting the circling British ships, and its speed was insufficient to let the ship actually ram the Royal Navy. The most interesting part of the battle was HMS Shah attempting to sink the Huascar with a torpedo. This was the first combat torpedo launch in the world. It missed, and both sides sailed away in the darkness. A couple of days later, the ship surrendered back to the government. A couple of years later, the War of the Pacific broke out with Chile on one side and Peru and Bolivia on the other. Chile was significantly stronger on paper, but the Peruvian Navy sent the Huascar to raid shipping and ports, to which the Chileans didn't actually have any answer, and the entire campaign was therefore delayed by about half a year, since they couldn't guarantee supply or support for their troops with the Huascar running around unchecked. And so, on the 21st of May 1879, the Battle of Iquique took place, and the Huascar and Independencia were facing off against 2 Chilean warships. Again, the armour of the Huascar proved unbreachable, but the Chilean ships had positioned themselves in front of a Peruvian town, so any missed shots would kill their own countrymen. So the Huascar instead rammed the corvette Esmeralda several times, which sent it to the bottom. The Esmeralda's captain tried to board the Huascar, but he wasn't heard giving the order over the noise of battle and was shot down unaccompanied on the deck of the Huascar. With the main battle over, the ship rescued the surviving enemy crew. Unfortunately for the Peruvian Navy, the Independencia tried to chase down the other Chilean ship and ended up getting stuck on a rock, with the Huascar having to rescue the crew and then destroy the stricken ship. However, the Chileans had got quite fed up of this affair and ordered their own new ironclad ships, and as with almost all exported ironclad vessels of this period, these also came from England. 6 Chilean vessels would then engage the Huascar at the Battle of Angamos. The two new Chilean frigates were armed with the latest British guns and armor-piercing shot, and these finally proved capable of penetrating the Huascar's armor, whilst their own 9-inch belt armor was capable of resisting the Peruvian fire. Despite a valiant struggle, Captain Grau was killed, and the ship steadily filled with more and more holes until it was on the verge of sinking. However, at this point the Chilean warships boarded and captured the vessel, towing it back to port and repairing it for service in the Chilean navy. With the Huascar captured, the Chilean army could now advance and would eventually go on to win the war. The Huascar's own part wasn't over, however. The Peruvian government had attempted to replace its losses by buying a number of ex-US Navy monitors, including the USS Ota, which they renamed Manco Capac after the last Inca ruler to actually fight the Spanish. Although this ship was one of the later US monitor designs with 15-inch Dahlgren guns, the Huascar was from a similar period of design history, and although the Huascar's new commander was also killed, the two ships battered each other without causing significant damage on either side, much like the earlier engagement of the USS Monitor and the CSS Virginia. 10 years down the line, and the ship was involved in yet another civil war, this time in Chile, and was again on the rebel side. The Chilean government, however, was overthrown, and since the rebels had won, it was promptly renamed a revolution instead of a rebellion. The Huascar would stay in service until 1897, when a boiler explosion resulted in her decommissioning, until 20 years later when she was brought back into service as a submarine tender and then a heritage ship. Hilariously, in 1949, in the era of jet fighters, missiles, and 16-inch naval guns, the ship was still listed by Jane's Fighting Ships as a coastal defense ship. By the 1950s, however, she was finally retired and gradually repaired and rebuilt to her earlier 1897 condition, and she can now be visited in the port of Talcahuano in Chile.
That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have a comment or suggestion for a ship to review, let us know in the comments below.